Today I'm going to share the story of a Quran memorizer, Hafiza. After her death, when they took her body for burial, they found the grave filled with scorpions and snakes. After the Fajr prayer, a grave digger named Abdur Rahman was on his way to the cemetery. He was assigned to dig a grave for a Hafiza today. But as he walked, he felt something strange. It seemed as though something heavy was weighing down on his legs, making it difficult for him to move forward. The previous night, he had received news that a Hafiza had passed away, and he was asked to dig a grave early in the morning so they could bury her quickly. Abdur Rahman was around 40 to 45 years old. Upon hearing the news of the Hafiza's death, he recited, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." He thought to himself, "O Allah, surely she must be one of your beloved servants. How fortunate I am to be the one digging the grave for a Hafiza. O Allah, forgive all my sins, those I know and those I don't, in return for this service." After finishing the Fajr prayer, Abdur Rahman arrived at the cemetery. He had all the necessary tools with him. However, something still felt off, an unusual uneasiness he had never felt while digging a grave before. He found an empty spot in the cemetery and began to dig. But as soon as he struck the ground with his spade, it felt unusually heavy. The soil was hard, and stones kept surfacing with each stroke. He thought, perhaps this spot is rocky, and moved to another location. But then, something happened that filled him with fear. "I've dug so many graves, but never have I encountered anything like this." Abdur Rahman's breathing quickened, and he sat down to rest. By then, the body of the Hafiza had arrived at the cemetery. When the body was placed in the grave, it began to tremble as if something was inside the earth. What happened next drained the color from everyone's faces. A large, black, two-headed snake emerged from the grave and began striking the body repeatedly. Everyone screamed and hurriedly pulled the body out of the grave. The snake remained, slithering around the grave. The sight of the snake and numerous scorpions made everyone shout, "Look! A snake is coming out of the grave! Astaghfirullah! Astaghfirullah!" But she was a Hafiza. How can a snake emerge from her grave? She taught so many children the Quran. What sin could she have committed that such a large black snake came out of her grave? People began to speak in hushed tones. Everyone moved away from the grave, no one daring to go near it, let alone bury the body there. They asked Abdur Rahman to dig another grave. Following their instructions, Abdur Rahman began digging another grave. But as soon as he started, the same horrifying scene appeared. Snakes and scorpions filled the grave. Two men whose children had been students of the Hafiza went to seek the counsel of an experienced scholar. Therefore, the two men hurried to the mosque and approached the alim. Seeing them running toward him, the alim sat up, concerned. He asked, "What has happened to you?" The men explained everything they had seen at the cemetery. Hearing this, the alim was shocked. He began reciting, "Astaghfirullah, Astaghfirullah," and said, "Take me to the cemetery immediately. I won't believe it until I see it with my own eyes." So, the two men set out with the alim toward the cemetery. Everyone there stared in amazement as they approached, making way for the alim so he could see the state of the grave for himself. The alim recited blessings, durud, silently and pondered, "O Allah, what could be behind this?" The alim glanced at the body and then at the gathered crowd. So many children were present, yet none dared to approach the body. When the alim looked into the grave, he saw a large snake. The sight made his hair stand on end. Then, one of the men stepped forward, greeted the alim with peace and said, "I want to tell you everything in detail." The first grave we dug turned up nothing but stones. The second grave revealed terrifying snakes and scorpions, causing everyone to flee in fear. The third time we dug a grave, we encountered the same scene. Snakes and scorpions filled the grave. The grave was nothing but a den of snakes and scorpions. The alim, upon hearing this, stepped back. A terrifying snake was slithering inside the grave, while the ground around the grave seemed to tremble as if countless scorpions were trying to escape from the soil. Tears welled up in the alim's eyes, and he began reciting, Astaghfirullah, Astaghfirullah. The relatives of the deceased started recounting the details of her life. After some thought, the alim suggested, let's take the body to the mosque. Everyone present had only one question in mind. How could a hafiza, who was supposed to be pious, have committed such a grave sin that Allah would punish her in such a way after her death? They took the body to the mosque, where many people had gathered. Everyone was filled with questions and doubts. People began murmuring, but she was a hafiza of the Quran. We all knew her as a righteous person. Yet she used to teach boys in her home. Maybe that's why Allah has punished her. Others added, but she only taught young boys aged 8 to 11. How could that be a sin? Various speculations and accusations filled the air. When the alim entered the mosque, everyone fell silent. Out of respect, they all remained seated. The body was handed over to a female scholar, Hakima, who was specially instructed to examine the body closely and determine if the hafiza had committed any sin that might explain such a punishment. People began to wonder, will the body still be buried in the grave? It seems she must have committed a serious sin to be punished like this. Even the earth refuses to accept her. The alim then addressed the crowd, saying, please be quiet. Only Allah knows who is truly sinful and who is righteous. Everyone fell silent out of respect for the alim, but the question still lingered in their minds. Why was a hafiza's grave filled with snakes and scorpions? The alim then instructed one of the men to gather all the children who had studied under the hafiza. I want to ask them some questions, he said. The children were already present in the mosque, and when they came forward, the alim gently asked them, did your teacher ever treat you harshly? Did she ever hit you? The children were silent at first, but then replied, no, she never treated us harshly. She was a very good teacher. We all learned our first lessons from her. She never raised her hand against any of us. All the children said the same thing, and their expressions confirmed it. The alim then asked, call her parents. 2 men stepped forward and said, Alim Sahib, her parents passed away a long time ago. She has no family left. The alim fell into deep thought. Such a pious girl with no stain on her character during her lifetime. Everyone spoke highly of her. Yet now, after her death, people are speaking ill of her. The alim, deeply troubled, entered his chamber in the mosque, performed ablution, and offered 2 units of voluntary prayer, nafil. After the prayer, he raised his hands in supplication to Allah and began to weep bitterly, his tears wetting his entire face. O Allah, I have always made decisions based on your guidance. Today, I seek your help. What sin could this girl have committed that even the earth is refusing to accept her? The alim wept so much that he became weak. He couldn't understand what sin the girl had committed. She lived alone and taught children the Quran. The alim was deeply worried, unable to find a solution to the problem. The children came forward and said, our teacher always performed the 5 daily prayers on time. She never delayed her prayers. She was a righteous person. Then why are there snakes and scorpions in her grave? This question seemed to have no answer. The alim had never been so perplexed while solving any issue before. Even though the girl lived alone in her house, inquiries from the neighbors revealed that she had a close friend with whom she shared all her joys and sorrows. The alim said, "Go and bring her friend here." But the people informed him that the friend had left the village months ago due to a dispute between the two friends and had moved far away. The alim realized that there must be a hidden secret about this girl. He then selected 2 people and instructed them, "Go to that village and bring her friend to me." The 2 men immediately set out to find the friend. Meanwhile, the female scholar, Hakima, "We found the girl." The alim, who was resting due to shoulder pain, immediately sat up upon hearing this. The girl had indeed arrived, fully veiled. She seemed very young and was weeping as she approached the alim, saying, "I can't understand how such a thing could happen to my friend. When these 2 men told me that my friend, Sarah, had died, and that such a dreadful thing had happened at her grave, I was shocked. I can't fathom how this could happen to her. People are now questioning her character, even though she was a pure soul." The alim said, "You know why you've been called here, don't you? This news has spread throughout the village. Everyone is now talking about her character, claiming that she must have been involved in sinful activities. They say that's why there are snakes and scorpions in her grave. The grave digger tried several times to get rid of the snake, but it keeps staring menacingly at the body as if ready to strike. For the love of Allah, please tell us the truth. What sin did she commit that brought such a severe punishment upon her?" The girl's eyes filled with tears. She replied, "My friend was not a sinner. No, she never committed zina, adultery. She was a devout woman of faith. But yes, she did commit a sin, a great sin, and that's why I distanced myself from her and eventually left the village. I cut off all ties with her because I knew if I stayed in this village, I would have to maintain a relationship with her, something I no longer wanted. My parents are dearer to me than my own life." The alim had been listening intently and now asked, "What sin did she commit that has brought such a severe punishment upon her?" The girl began to recount the story. "Alim Sahib, I used to live in this village. She was my neighbor. We both memorized the Quran together in our childhood. Since her father passed away when she was very young, all the household responsibilities fell on her shoulders. Because her financial situation was not good, she started teaching children the Quran and accepted small gifts in return. Many children came to her for lessons, and the wealthier families would often support her financially. In this way, she and her mother managed to live a reasonably good life. But over time, her mother's health began to deteriorate. She became increasingly ill with age, eventually losing her mind. She would often act like a child, and her condition worsened to the point where she could not remember anything. She became a burden on her daughter. At first, my friend cried a lot and prayed for her mother. She took care of her and made many supplications for her recovery. But as her mother's condition worsened, my friend became increasingly frustrated. Even when her mother called out to her for help, she would often ignore her, making excuses about being busy. Sometimes her mother would soil the bed because she was too weak to get up, and my friend would have to clean it up. But she did so grudgingly, often neglecting to change the bed sheets. If she felt like it, she would give her mother food, but if not, the poor woman would remain hungry and thirsty. I once witnessed her mother crying out for water repeatedly, but my friend ignored her pleas. In the end, I gave her mother the water she so desperately needed. After drinking, she clung to me, weeping bitterly and complaining about her daughter. When my friend heard this, she came and slapped her mother hard across the face, yelling, "What haven't I done for you? My life is ruined because of you. All my money is spent on your treatment, and still, you keep complaining and embarrassing me in front of others." I couldn't stand to see this. I slapped my friend in return and left her house, never to return. I moved away from this village. A few days after I left, her mother passed away, and now, 2 weeks after her mother's death, my friend has also passed away. Everyone realized that the girl had failed to fulfill her duties towards her mother. She had disrespected and mistreated her, despite outwardly fulfilling other obligations. Allah has commanded us in the Quran not to even utter a word of disrespect, like oof, to our parents. Yet this girl had completely disregarded that command and mistreated her mother. Hearing this, everyone present began to cry, their eyes filled with tears. They started to seek forgiveness from their own mothers for any disrespectful behavior and repented to Allah. Everyone began reciting Astaghfirullah, Astaghfirullah for the deceased girl because they had witnessed firsthand the consequences of being disobedient to one's mother. When they returned to bury the girl again, they found the snake and scorpion still present in the grave, waiting to attack the body. The alim said, "There is nothing more we can do. We must bury her here, as it is now a matter between her and Allah." And so the snake and scorpions were buried along with her body. Astaghfirullah.